Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Fisher, and I am a certified educator with ACPE. I am also the director of the resident program at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, as part of the US Army CPE system. I'm doing this video to hopefully help you in your process of working with the ACPE share drive, the OneDrive, and the portfolio. I have done the entire process in the new way from beginning to end, and it took me about 30 months. So there's hope. You can make it. Keep at it. So I've learned a lot about some of the best ways for me to work with the technology that's involved here. Specifically for this video, I'm going to be showing you how I work with the OneDrive. So what I've done here, you see, this is my just my share drive that I have as a member of ACPE. You can see that I've got phase 1, phase 2 stuff there. We're going to work with this folder that I created for the purpose of this event, this video, called demonstration. So I go to demonstration, I've got a folder for evidence, I've got a folder for theory, and phase 2 competencies. Now what I'd like to show you first of all is access to this folder. So when you go up to share, you're going to get some options of who can work with this folder. So when you click on that, if you do anyone with the link, we'll come back to that, but basically anyone you send the link to can access it. Anyone with access to ACPE, they have a login, they can also access it. People with existing access already have access, they can access it. In this context, we're going to do specific people, because as part of your committee, you're going to want a specific group of people to have access to this material as you work with it. For me, that included my theory mentor, that included of course, my training educator and my certification official from ACPE, and then members of my committee later on when I presented for my integration interview. But in this context, I'm going to show you how to just add your training educator for the purposes of demonstration. So my training education, Chaplain Ron Cooper, has worked with me for the last couple of years. I want him to have editing capabilities, because as I work with the competencies, I'd write some, he'd write some, I'll show you that. And he needed to have editing available to him. These are all choices you can make as far as what's important to you. So once you hit apply, now it's saying, who do I want? I want Ron Cooper. He comes right up, acpe.edu. And now I've sent him a notification that says there's a link and you have access to it. Now he has access to everything in this folder. So I'm going to open up my competencies. So this is just an old document that I was using on my desktop for various things. I deleted everything out of this cell so I could show you this. But as you look at it, I'd write some in here, and then I'd have a link. And this link, of course, went directly to my portfolio, and the readers were able to access the documents that demonstrated my competencies. The reason this isn't coming up is because this document was sitting on my desktop. When you use this, best practice for me was you have you'll notice it's open in the browser. You can use it just from the browser. What I did is on my desktop, I'd have a document I'd work with. I would copy and paste paragraph at a time into the browser document, which is the shared document. And by doing that, I'd write my stuff, and then Chaplain Cooper, my training educator, would make some notes about how it was going. And this served me quite well later on, because as you can see here, in this cell, I added some material, and on 18 April, he looked at it and offered some thoughts here. And then if he, and later on, I think for several of my competencies, when I finally presented it, I think we'd gone back and forth 4 or 5 times. In this context, maybe he'd want to come in and say, Jonathan is awesome. And of course, he'd want to use an exclamation point there because, I mean, if you're not writing with exclamation points, I mean, are you really writing? So he'd put his comments in there. And then by putting in his comments, we'd go back and forth, and we're demonstrating that there's an evolution taking place. I've started here in my understanding and I've ended up here. And that's what I want to demonstrate over time. And I think this kind of fits in with the philosophy of ever increasing autonomy. And there's kind of an ever increasing demonstration and integration of the work that we're doing. So that's the way we used the portfolio. But let's say I want to, in order to demonstrate some work with P1.1, I want to add an admin document. Oh, that's interesting. It's got it highlighted. Well, I'm going to, for the purposes of demonstration, unhighlight that. Okay. So I want to add an admin document to demonstrate that I know what I'm doing. So we're going to go back to demonstration. We're going to evidence. And let's see, what have I got here? I've got I've got CPE system dates. Now this is a PDF document. So when you open up a PDF document, you get this lovely little bar at the top, which will allow you to share things. I need the link, so I'm going to copy link. Now I've got some choices here. What am I going to do with this link? Again, people with existing access, I want Chaplain Cooper to be able to see it, so I'm going to apply that. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my competencies, and then I'm going to highlight admin document. And then it's copy paste on my device. What I need to do, you go down to link, and I'm just going to do Control V, and that paste it in there, insert, I've created a link. Now as part of my process, maybe I want to just make sure that everyone reading it can see it's a link. I don't know why this happened, but on several cells, when I would insert a link, what would happen is that it wouldn't change the color of the font. What it would do is just underline it. So you'll see that I really wanted to highlight these are links in the evidence. So what I did was I went back after I'd added the link and I highlighted it, and then it's very clear that's a link. You hover over the link, you can see it there, you can click on it, and it will bring it right up. On this device, I got to hit Control and then click, and then it'll load the material. So let's say that now I want to add some theory, right? So about group. Let's say I want to add some theory about groups. So in this context, I'm going to go back and work with that. So in order to talk about this, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I did my theory presentation. So for me, I had written some papers, but then it kind of fit my nature more to do an actual presentation. So I took my papers and I created a 50-slide PowerPoint presentation about my theory. And it's served me well. I've presented it, and it looks like this. It's quite a large document. Again, 50 slides. When I open it, I've got both the slides, of course, and the notes. So in the notes is all where I put my theory, and as a demonstration of what that looked like. So it serves me well in the sense that in my current resident group, when something comes up and I want to demonstrate something, I can just pull up a slide and look at it. So here, if I want to teach my current residents about how I understand learning, of course, at the heart of it is spiral learning theory by Jerome Bruner. And I have this slide, I can pull it up and do a little mini didactic. And then later on, if I want to do, talk a little bit about, let's say, the Johari window, I can pull this up and look at that. I can talk about education as cultural work, how I understand the idea of sin and evil, and how I've come to understand that through process theology. This has served me really well to talk about, various aspects of my program, and of course vignettes. So I offer that to you as that's how I did it. It served me well in my process, but there was a real downside to that. And the downside is that it's very cumbersome to work with. So in order to make it easier, what I did was I went back into that big theory presentation. I broke it up into smaller chunks. So essentially I created 50 different presentations with one slide in each presentation. That sounds like a lot, but it really only took me about 20 minutes to do it after I had completed it, and it served me quite well. So now when I click on, for example, slide 39, switch to some group theory, it brings up the slide. And of course, there's the notes as well when it finally loads. And there's the notes, the group as a microcosm. So using this in the actual competencies, phase 2 competency, is a little more challenging because when you open up a document that you can work with, it doesn't give you that same ribbon. But it's pretty easy to use. You just go down. This is a different way to do links. And I'm just going to click on that. It's going to highlight that particular slide. I'm going to go up to copy link. And it's the same process. I definitely just want people with existing access. I go into my competencies, and now I've got some theory about group in there. Link, Control V, done. Now I've got group theory in there. So that's how I did theory. That's how the links basically work. Let me show you one more thing when it comes to links. And so for this, I'm going to use as an example, let's say I want to put something in there about my introduction, right? So now I want to add some introduction, and I'm going to say line 40. Now, what does this mean? So again, this worked well for me. There is so much material in my competencies. I mean, I don't really know what the page count is, but there are so many pages, so much reading. My training educator one day was just telling me how much work it was to look at all these. So my overriding principle when I prepared my competencies was make it as easy as possible to get the reader to the part in the evidence they need to read. They don't need to read, another 10-page, 15-page final. They need to see that spot, and I want them to see that particular part of the document. So to make that work well for me, what I did, and you may do this already. I don't know how this works exactly on your device. I used Word, Microsoft Word, and I used Google Documents. You can do it in both, though. If you use Google Documents, you need to get an extension to do this. But I'm going to show you how it's in this. This is a PDF, but of course I created it in Word. So if you look down here, what you'll see is I've got line numbers. Now this is a setting that you can do when you're setting up a document in Word. You just go into where you can see the line numbering. And you can set it for every single line. I think that's the way lawyers do it. Or you could set it up to every second line or fifth line or 10th line. I found that it was least cumbersome and cleanest to do it every 10 lines. So, we've got line 10, line 20, go down here, here's line 30, line 40. Oh, so my student description. So what I want in my competencies is I want them to read my student description at line 40, you see? So I point them right to line 40. If I want to point them, let's say I want them to look at my learning goals, which is to deepen my understanding of the clinical rhombus. It looks like my material there starts about line 150. If I want them to see how I supervise use the clinical rhombus, then that's line 160. I've got a vignette at line 180, and so on and so forth. So again, it's a PDF, so I can just copy the link, and we can put it right in my competencies. Just going to highlight it there. And I'm going to add the link. Boom. Now some other things you can do. Now let's say I've written this document and I want to present it to my CEC group. Well, there's some different ways I can do it. Of course, you can always just email the document to everybody. That's a thing you could do. Or you could do it this way. So underneath share, you get some options. Now, Here you're going to specify, you can just type in their email address. They'll get a link to this document. They'll be able to see it. But let's say that person doesn't have access to ACPE. They can't log in. And you want to share it with people. They're not ACPE educators, but it's important for you to get some feedback from them. So if you hit anyone with the link, you get some more options. You know, if I'm presenting to this group, right, I don't necessarily want them to be able to edit, so I'm not going to click editing. If you click allow editing, they can edit. If you don't allow editing, they can just look at it. You can set a date for the link to expire. Now, when I first started working with links, this is where this caught me up, because I wanted people to be able to see this. So I was putting anyone with the link could see the document. Well, the problem is the program automatically generates a date to expire for protection, security. It makes sense. But then the links would expire and your links won't work. So when you're doing your documents, you got to think through what link am I wanting? If you're wanting to do this for your competencies and you want the link to always work, then you want to use specific people. If you don't really care, it's just you're using the share drive for people, then, you know, generate a link. It'll go away after a couple of months, or you can set it to be kind of whatever you want it to be. Another setting that you have is you can set a password, right? You can say COVID is terrible, and Microsoft tells me it's a very weak password. So maybe if I added a bunch of numbers, it would become fair. I don't know. So you can add a password in there to further protect it. And if you don't want people to download it, this is a cool feature, and you just hit block download. What happens then is they'll be able to see it by following the link in their browser, but they won't be able to download it to their computer. So if you want to protect your material in that way, you can do that as well. So again, for your portfolio, you do not want to use the first option. Anyone with a link can see it. One, because you've got student privacy issues. And then two, the links will expire. And when they expire, they won't be able to be used anymore. So when you do those links, make sure that you use people with existing access to do that. And then the link will work for the duration of the document. So those are some best practices from my perspective that worked well for me in my process, and I hope they help you in your process. You can find me in the ACPE directory. If you have some further questions, I can help you with that. But otherwise, blessings on your journey. May it go well for you.